Founders Park Media and Samurai 7 Books presents MOONBASE Rogue, Book 3 of the Viper series, written by Mark Caldwell Jones, read by Play AI. Dedication for Laura Kate. You may be as different as the sun and the moon, but the same blood flows through both your hearts. You need her as she needs you. George R.R. Martin. Epigraph. Man has gone out to explore other worlds and other civilizations without having explored his own labyrinth of dark passages and secret chambers, and without finding what lies behind doorways that he himself has sealed. Stanislaw Lem. Forward. Top Secret DR Ultra DIA Intelligence Report by Captain Natalie Nicks, Defense Intelligence Agency. Since 1958, the American government has controlled the creation of future technology through an organization called the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA. Aided by their secret division, DR Ultra, they fight a shadow war to make sure cutting-edge weapons stay in the hands of the American military. My name is Natalie Nicks. Like you, I had no idea about this hidden war until my first assignment as a newly minted Defense Intelligence Agency officer put me right in the middle of it. During a covert mission, I was targeted for assassination and almost killed by a suicide bomber. To honor my sacrifice, DR Ultra used its secret Talon technology to revive me. Now, equipped with several cybernetic enhancements, I work with an elite team of investigators called Reaper Force. We stand as the only line of defense, protecting the present from the weapons of tomorrow. We aren't just fighting a shadow war. We are fighting to save the future of mankind. My codename is Viper, and this is my story. Part 1. Scream thy last scream. Chapter 1. Buenos Aires. Natalie Nicks had been fighting Valentina Silva for about 5 minutes when the thought flashed through her mind that she might have really, seriously underestimated her opponent. After she failed to block the rabbit punch to her kidneys, that theory was confirmed. The fist hit her like a sledgehammer, knocking her sideways off her feet. Desperation surged through Nicks's body. She had to get up. She had to keep fighting. She'd come too far and was too close to fail now. The mission was to take Silva alive and learn what she knew about Riza Asmara, an old foe who would once again threaten Nicks, her loved ones, and her team. Everyone said Asmara was dead. Nicks wasn't so sure, and Silva offered the only viable means of getting to the truth and settling the matter once and for all. Nicks had spent months tracking the woman from the Yucatan resort in Mexico where they'd first met to this crime-infested neighborhood of Buenos Aires. It was her singular obsession. However, the past few weeks of tracking Silva had left the team running ragged. Every promising lead they followed, every clue that seemed to bring them closer, ended in disappointment. She would pop up in one place, then the next second across the world somewhere else. It was like chasing a phantom. Silva was somehow always one step ahead. Then Mouse, the team's computer genius behind the scenes, unearthed a new clue from his meticulous data analysis. The woman she was currently fighting was not simply Valentina Silva, but an elusive and deadly assassin codenamed Chimera. The alias and dual identities seemed to be the source of their constant confusion. But standing here, finally facing her enemy in the flesh, Nicks wondered why she'd been so eager to confront the woman. Chimera, as the rest of the team now called her, was kicking her ass. Trying to rally and avoid another cheap shot, Nicks used the momentum from Chimera's last punch to her advantage and rolled forward. When she tumbled up onto her knees, another fist slammed into her head. Nicks went down on her side, her face crammed into the bunched folds of a dusty throw rug that smelled like cat piss and mildew. She lay there watching black spots dance along the wall of the cracked wallpaper, admiring what a pretty pattern the contrasting shapes made, until Chimera's boot hit her in the hip with such force it hurled her another few feet, where she smashed a delicate side table into a pile of splintered wood. Flux, her super-annoying AI assistant, a device she barely tolerated, came online to announce an adjustment to the pain receptors in her cybernetic arms and legs. That seemed like an appropriate decision, however. It did little to help her situation or improve her opinion of the program. She was still losing the fight, which, on one level, shouldn't have been possible. Nicks was a billion-dollar bionic soldier, for God's sake, and according to their intel, Chimera had no such enhancements. "Can I shoot her now?" Fatima Nasrallah yelled sarcastically. Fatima was a skinny, olive-skinned brunette in her late 20s with naturally ruddy cheeks and round, delicate features. Just a few months older than Nicks, she was just shy of 30. But she showed no signs of age. If anything, she was only getting better at her job. Originally from Ras Al Ain, a town in northeast Syria, she'd been recruited by DR Ultra after proving herself as a fierce Kurdish sniper, notorious for her expert marksmanship and a penchant for coming to the rescue with a well-placed bullet. Because of her skill and loyalty, she'd become one of Nicks's most vital teammates. Throughout their grueling pursuit of Chimera, they had agreed to one rule: don't kill the target. Much to the chagrin of Fatma, Nicks wanted her alive. She needed the answers she held. If they could subdue the woman, they would interrogate her and finally unravel the enigma of the Dharmapala's current operations and Riza Asmara's whereabouts. Right now, Fatima was across the tiny apartment, hiding behind the cover of a bookshelf. The cramped flat, which comprised a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen near the entrance, was barely big enough to live in, much less host a street brawl. "How about if I say please?" Fatima proposed, adopting a saccharine tone. "Just one bullet." "Okay." Nicks wanted to say no, but Chimera's last blow had knocked the wind out of her so harshly, all she could do was suck air and let out a cryptic moan that apparently made no sense to her teammate, because Fatima started cussing in Kurdish again. Their terrible luck chasing Chimera had led to a lot of cursing in native tongues, which added to the confusion during important moments like this one. Nicks had no skill with foreign languages, and when Fatima got upset, she inevitably reverted to her native Kurdish. Hand signals helped sometimes. She got up on one elbow and saw Fatima motioning for her to stay down. Fatima had her vintage handgun, a high-standard .22 HDM semi-automatic pistol, with its long, sexy black barrel pointed in Chimera's direction. But Chimera had retreated behind the divider wall that separated the living room from the kitchen. Fatima didn't have a clear shot. Ironically, Nicks had a clear shot, but she didn't have a gun. She'd entered the apartment thinking her bionic power would be enough to take her target down. How wrong that had been. Now she studied her foe while she caught her breath. Chimera was a beautiful Hispanic-looking woman with the angular features of a magazine model. She was a few inches taller than Nicks, who stood about 5'7". They seemed to be about the same weight, too, around 125. Her long, jet-black hair tied back in a ponytail revealed a strange look of concern on her face. Despite being a formidable opponent, she didn't seem to enjoy the fight. Hopefully she was hurt. That didn't seem likely, but Nicks prayed anyway, hoping one of her wild bionic swings had done some damage. Nicks's new bloody nose and aching ribs said otherwise. Chimera was matching Nicks blow for blow, giving her hell. It was as if the woman had two sledgehammers for fists. Her hands. That was it. What trick was Chimera using to make her hands so damn powerful? Nicks examined her own and noticed her artificial skin was peeling off around her knuckles. She was leaking her strange, purple biocoolant. Chimera had grinned at the sight of the damage. Nicks's enemies always seemed happy to know she wasn't invulnerable. However, the strange skin was easily replaced, and the artificial bone underneath, a boron-carbon composite, was stronger than steel. Still, it was disturbing. No matter how many times it had happened, she couldn't accept the sight of her own skin being flayed from her body. In contrast, Chimera was wearing black gloves. If they were sap gloves, they would have weighted lead knuckles or even iron bars sewn into the fingers. Thinking it through, it seemed the most logical explanation for her advantage. Nicks decided she needed to disable her hands, or get those damn gloves off as fast as possible. She shook her head to throw off the fog, and her new purple highlights plastered themselves to her wet forehead. Chimera was making her sweat in more ways than one. Maybe with a bit more effort, she could return the favor. Nicks stood back up and locked eyes with Fatima. "Shoot her, but don't kill her." "I would if your skinny ass wasn't in the line of fire," Fatima shouted back. Determined to get a better angle, Fatima shuffled into a corner and dropped behind a second bookshelf full of vinyl albums. Chimera was one step ahead. Again. She picked up a kitchen chair and hurled it just as Fatima fired. Fatima's shot went wild, pinging off the refrigerator. She ducked to avoid the flying chair. When she popped back up, Chimera was there. She grabbed Fatima's gun hand and twisted until there was a sickening pop. Fatima screamed, dropped her gun, and doubled over in a fetal position. A broken finger or two, Nicks guessed. God damn it, this had to stop. Nicks jumped across the room, landed, and delivered 2 hard punches to Chimera's ribs, but the woman didn't go down. Instead, she spun around, pivoting away from Nicks, as if to run back into the kitchen. Nicks clawed at her to keep her close, and found herself with a handful of the woman's jacket. She yanked it as hard as she could. The jacket ripped along a seam as Chimera turned and punched Nicks in the gut, sending her flying across the room. Nicks crashed into the south wall and slumped forward on her knees. She wanted to puke. That punch had hurt her bad. What the hell was going on here? No one had that much natural power. "Are you dead?" Fatma asked from across the room, pain clear in her own voice. "Almost," Nicks groaned. She wasn't exaggerating. That last punch had broken a rib, or worse, and all she'd done was rip off Chimera's jacket. It seemed pathetic, but then she looked again and realized she'd scored a minor victory. The jacket had been hiding Chimera's true secret. Her foe was wearing some kind of metallic body armor. Thin strips of shiny steel covered her arms and extended down into her leather gloves. Chimera seemed eager to show it off now that it was exposed. She tore the rest of her jacket away and engaged the device's strange features. New pieces of metal telescoped out from the central spine, across her body, covering her arms, chest, and legs. These extra strips of metal engaged the rest of the hardware that was already in place, and with a click and a lock, joined themselves together, creating a lattice of armor. Now it was a suit of metal bones that seemed to move with the ease of a real human body. The more Nicks studied it, she realized it was something more complex than armor. Her colleagues in DR Ultra might call it an exoskeleton. Nicks guessed this was some kind of device designed to counter her bionics. It gave Chimera strength that rivaled Nicks's own power. It was obvious now why she'd felt so outmatched. With both Fatima and Nicks down for the count for a second time, maybe for good, Chimera reached down and spun a dial on the box affixed to her waist. When she did, Nicks heard a fresh wave of electricity surge through the exoskeleton as if it had been doubly charged. She didn't know what that meant, but it sure as hell didn't sound good. Chimera punched one metal hand into the palm of the other with a clang, a twisted Cheshire grin curling on her face as she leaped across the room, ready to finish the fight. Chapter 2. The Moon. Dr. Ying Yu Fong held her breath, steadied her aim, and swept the lens of the rangefinder over the dark side of the crater. Attacking the first astronaut without detection would be the catalyst for her most important plan to date. While some might consider such an act murder, Fong judged it with her infamously detached logic. Similar to how geneticists edit undesirable genes, the astronaut required excision. His removal, while ruthless, was imperative to ensure the completion of her mission. And now, it was time to strike. All three members of the team dismounted from their rover and bounded effortlessly over the ridge into the deeper shadows. When they hit the agreed-upon mark, they stopped. Fang, who now hid behind a substantial rock formation covering her from any observers, swept her chestnut-brown eyes over the alien landscape, marveling at the view, momentarily lost in the wonder of it all. The moon was a perfect canvas for her audacious plan, its sterile tapestry devoid of Earth's distractions. It was an ocean of silence, broken only by the soft hiss of her own breath in her helmet's radio. This would be her sanctuary, and the darkness her shroud. Here, shielded from the prying eyes of Earth, she would be free to create the foundation of a bold future. Through her polarized visor, she watched their target, an American named Major Kyle Connors. He was a communications engineer, and his crew inside the secret moon base called Luna 1 had ordered him to restore function to a radio tower on the ridge just inside the lip of the crater. He was about 50 meters away, working diligently on his repairs, unaware of their presence. Behind her, Kilgore and Garrick, two highly paid co-conspirators, waited obediently. They had successfully sabotaged the tower hours before to draw at least one astronaut out into the open. They'd waited another hour, wondering if they'd been seen or their scheme detected. Then, to Fang's great relief, Connors bounded out of the rear airlock, alone and vulnerable, just as she'd hoped. From the intercepted communications, Fang could hear Connors singing an old rock and roll song. "Another brick in the wall," he crooned. He was calm and oblivious to the approaching danger, unlike Fang, who was buzzing with adrenaline. Though she judged a man's life no more valuable than the tiny lunar rocks crunching under her boots, she needed at least one astronaut to sell their deception. Through her radio, she ordered her team to move. Her two partners nodded in unison and advanced. For a moment, it seemed the men had magically disappeared. The shadows cast here were pitch black, and Fang's team wore older pressure suits stained by layers of lunar dust and dirt. If not for her prior awareness of their position, it was nearly impossible to track them as they moved. Connors, who now had his back turned on Fang's advancing comrades, wore a crisp and clean blue suit, different from the normal white NASA uniform. Fang believed this subtle difference confirmed he was part of a Space Force operation, testing the secret technology she so desperately wanted. Soon enough, it would be hers. Again, she swept the scope along the landscape. Kilgore and Garrick were in place now, and Connors was still unaware. No sign of anyone else. She gave the last signal, and they attacked. In one swift, coordinated move, Kilgore lassoed a loop of steel wire around Connors's neck, while Garrick swept his legs out from under him. Then, Kilgore's winching tool activated, pulling Connors into the shadows. While Garrick held their prisoner down, Kilgore circled Connors, staking his arms and legs with plastic tethers and a handheld pneumatic driver. The tool, normally used in lunar mining operations, anchored the restraints deep into the sandy regolith. "Target acquired," Kilgore reported dispassionately. This was a signal intended for Fang. Fang sprang from her hiding place and slid into position next to Connors, who was still down, flat on his back, flailing like a hooked fish. She produced the needed canister, which was painted red to mark its dangerous contents. Next, she screwed it into a pressure valve reserved for emergency oxygen and deployed the gas. Connors struggled, turning red as if choking. Foam appeared in the corners of his mouth. His frightened eyes widened in fear, and a single tear rolled down the side of his face. In contrast, a faint smile formed on Fang's face. She reassured herself that she wasn't a monster, but a scientist, a visionary, a pioneer. And sometimes, pioneers had to carve their paths through the bodies of those who stood in their way. Luna 1, Conrad Crater, Moon. Mission engineer Eric Rogers, safe within the confines of Luna 1, scrutinized the blinking indicator for the second time. Connors, this is Rogers for Overwatch. You are out of visual range, and I'm getting a valid failure signal from your suit. Please respond. Through the large, aerospace-grade glass windows, the alien beauty of the lunar surface stretched out under the glaring sunlight. A stunning yet unsettling monochromatic vista. Inside, one found a similarly colorless environment of metal, high-tech plastic, and the miracle of molded regolith. The atmosphere smelled like cold steel, recycled air, and the hint of body odor. Besides the sounds of classic rock, the persistent hum of the life support systems and the occasional crackle of radio static filled the space. Rogers scanned the horizon carefully several times. His teammate was not where he should be this time in his work cycle, which meant the lunar mobility suit malfunction might be accurate. While he waited, he brushed a hand over his close-cropped red hair and twisted his slender, wiry frame, trying to get more comfortable in his seat. He hoped for a response, but got nothing but radio silence. This wasn't good. He spun the volume dial so the sound of static filled the module. Connors, I repeat, you are out of visual range. Your suit shows a malfunction. Respond with your location and status. The call echoed throughout the room and down the connecting tunnel to the rest of the base. A disturbing burst of static echoed back, but Connors didn't respond, proving the Major was in serious trouble. Rogers triggered an alarm that broadcast base-wide and cued the radio again. His teammates, who heard the alert, quickly spilled in. The first to arrive, Mission Specialist Katrina Green, grabbed the nearest monocular and stationed herself in front of the window. This massive porthole gave her a complete view of the back of the base, which butted up to the edge of the Conrad crater. As she scanned the ridge, her eyes hardened. I see the communication tower perfectly fine, but Connors isn't there, Green said. The Midwestern lilt was clear in her voice. Do you think he's working somewhere down the ridge? You know, we mounted the main transformer at the bottom of the tower. Rogers looked at Green with concern. Her blonde ponytail framed a sharply chiseled face that complemented her athletic frame, a testament to rigorous military training. She was one of the most steadfast members of the crew, intolerant of nonsense and perpetually ready for action. Her discipline made Rogers value her opinion above all others. I don't think he would have gone radio silent this long. Something is wrong. I agree, Green said, just as Mission Specialist Omar Turner and Commander James Peterson rushed in. Omar Turner's mahogany complexion stood out against the bland surroundings of the lunar module. He offered a noble silhouette in his blue crew uniform, his muscles honed from countless hours of training. The scent of fresh coffee clung to him as he moved in closer. His voice resonated with the soft rhythms of his native Louisiana. In contrast, James Peterson was the picture of seasoned experience. He had a graying buzz cut and crow's feet etching an atlas of adventures around his bright green eyes. His voice, roughened by age, carried the authority of a born leader. The two men began talking over each other, offering explanations. Might just be on his knees behind that boulder. It's blocking our view, Turner said. Possibly. That explains the lack of a visual, Peterson offered. But why isn't he responding to the call? Could the malfunction be a glitch? Turner asked. He planned to reset the relays after the repair was done. That would affect all our comms, including the gear in the suit. That's an idea, but not sure we want to take the risk. I could go check on him. Green glanced to her left. Several pressure suits hung there, ready for use. He's not that far. I am the EVA master, after all. Commander Peterson nodded. Get suited up. Rogers suddenly jumped up, removed his headphones, and grabbed the monocle from Green. He trained it on a point near the comms tower and pointed. Wait, it's Connors. There he is. But, he's in trouble. Everyone moved closer to the windows, searching the landscape. What? Peterson asked. What do you see? Sir, Rogers stuttered. He pointed hesitantly toward the horizon. There's a whole new group of astronauts out there. That's impossible. Look for yourself, sir, Rogers replied, passing Peterson the monocle. Jesus, I hope I'm hallucinating. A sharp intake of breath filled the module. Two gray-suited figures were dragging Connors toward Luna 1. A third waved frantically, signaling the crew inside. Their teammate wasn't moving. He was clearly in trouble. Connors is definitely down, Peterson exclaimed. The strangers assisting Connors seemed to be 3 miners from Ryder Astronautics. The suits were dark gray from use or by design. The color so closely matched the lunar regolith that they acted like camouflage. Commander Peterson turned to Green. Who are those guys? Green grabbed another monocular and scanned the group. For security purposes, she'd studied the Ryder mining crew extensively, knew them as well as her own. The men are Garrick and Kilgore, she said. We have intel profiles on those two. Neither one of them has the security clearance to be inside our base. I don't know the other one. That's a new face. Green definitely didn't know the stranger. She appeared to be a woman, which was another unusual sign. All the regular miners were men. A rough fraternity of tough guys well suited for one of the most dangerous jobs one could imagine. Eric, she said, her voice clipped and professional. Tried the Ryder frequency. Let's confirm their call signs. Rogers, his face reflecting his concern, nodded and toggled the radio. This is Luna Base 1 to Ryder Astronomics. Please identify yourselves. Silence. The static of an unanswered hail hung heavily in the room. Green looked at Commander Peterson. Sir, Green said, her tone shifting from caution to insistence. We shouldn't open the airlock without verifying their identities. This is a Pentagon black site. We can't afford to take any chances. Are you nuts? Don't you see Connors is injured? We can't leave him out there, Peterson barked, as if exasperated by her suggestion. Open the airlock, and as soon as it depressurizes, get everyone in here, he yelled, pointing them toward the portal. He turned to Turner, who stood next to him. And the medcart, Turner. Get it up here, in case Connors is injured. We'll treat him right here if need be. Yes, sir, Turner said, and rushed out. Rogers activated the re-entry protocol on the airlock, then turned back to Peterson. Depressurization commencing, sir. Green eyed the strange group getting closer to the base. Shouldn't we let Vandenberg know about this emergency? She suggested in her most cautious tone. Peterson, who was fixated on Connors's progress and now cursing under his breath, stopped momentarily and turned to Rogers. Yeah, it's a good call. Do as Green suggests. Hail Colonel Rollins and let him know we have a situation. Rogers nodded and attempted to send the transmission. Sir, that channel isn't working either, he said, his fingers furiously dancing over the control panel. I can't get a clear signal. All lines of communication seem to be compromised, even the emergency frequencies. But how is that possible? Green asked, looking over Rogers's shoulder. Emergency comms are on another system. I don't know. Rogers was sweating now. I'll try another back door on the low-orbit mapping satellite. Hail them any way you can, Peterson said, but our priority is getting Connors inside. Turner returned with the medical kit. He eyed Green, and she signaled him to move within earshot. I'm going to get our weapons, she whispered. Take care of the airlock for me. Turner nodded stoically and brushed past Green to do as she asked. Green scrutinized the approaching astronauts one last time. She was acutely aware of her role in maintaining the base's security. She couldn't, in good conscience, dismiss the gnawing unease that stirred within her, the prickle of caution that whispered she might need more than just her wits in the coming moments. She needed to be armed. In the ensuing hustle, Green quietly detached herself from the group. Once out of sight, she ran toward the security node where she would find the weapons vault. She heard the airlock hissing behind her, but stayed focused. If the worst happened, she would be ready. Chapter 3. Buenos Aires. Chimera jumped across the room like a confident hunter who'd finally cornered their prey. Gears whirred and flashes of electricity buzzed over her steel suit. Current traveled down the metal components, gathering more power as it went, filling the air with the smell of ozone. Nix stepped back into a defensive stance, surprised by her opponent's newfound fearlessness. Chimera threw a right cross, which Nix blocked. Nix then countered with her own jab. Chimera slipped that and launched another punch that Nix once again blocked with her forearm. Despite Flux's adjustments, the impact of the metal exoskeleton against her soft flesh was excruciating, and Chimera seemed to know it. She smirked and swung again. Nix ducked the third punch, stepped to her left, snatched a lamp from a nearby side table and viciously threw it at her foe. It spiraled toward Chimera's head like a football. The force of the punch overwhelmed him, and Chimera blocked it with an armored fist, and ceramic dust exploded in a cloud around her head, threatening to blind her. She turned away, desperate to shield her eyes. Nix pounced like a tiger, clawing at Chimera's back, and put the assassin in a headlock. But Chimera, proving she had not only the right weapon but the skills to match, didn't miss a beat. She reached up, grabbed Nix by the hair, and with one arm bent over and threw Nix across the room. Nix tumbled into the flimsy sheetrock wall and ragdolled to the ground. 2 gunshots rang out. The bullets whizzed past Chimera's head, barely missing her. Startled, Chimera turned to see Fatima, who was doing her best to shoot using her non-dominant left hand. She lunged for the nearby coat closet, opened the door, ripped it off its hinges, then hurled it at Fatima. The door hit with a disturbing smack. Like one domino falling on another, Fatima fell flat beneath it, where she remained pinned in place. Perhaps to keep a better eye on her, Chimera grabbed a seemingly unconscious Fatima by one ankle and dragged her into the center of the living room. The servos in the joints whirled as she did this, and more ozone filled the air. Nix tried to shake off the last blow while keeping an eye on the suit's power source. It was the bulkiest part of the device and fixed to the small of Chimera's back. The perfect target. She took a deep breath and launched herself across the room, landing a foot or two behind Chimera. She then pummeled the actuator as hard as she could with a succession of fast rabbit punches, hammering it until parts of its metal box fell away, exposing some of the inner wiring and electronics. Chimera pivoted and backhanded Nix. Nix flew across the room once again, hit the same wall harder than before, and slumped down. Meanwhile, Fatima was trying her best to get up. She grabbed at the nearby coffee table for leverage and grasped one of its short legs. As she pulled, the table tipped, spilling its contents, which included a big unopened bottle of tequila. It rolled across the rug and came to rest in front of her. Nix stood up and tried to shake off what felt like another concussion. She stepped forward on her 2 wobbly legs, barely able to see straight, when she heard Fatima yell. Fatima had thrown the bottle with her last bit of energy and slumped back to the floor. The tequila tumbled through the air toward Nix, who reached up and grabbed it just in time. Then the light bulb went off. When Chimera advanced again, Nix was ready. The assassin threw a fast haymaker that Nix thankfully avoided. Nix gave Chimera 2 lightning-quick punches to the face with her right hand while holding the tequila in her left. When Chimera turned away to avoid another punch, Nix swung the bottle down on the exposed actuator. There was a sudden explosion of sizzles and pops, as if someone had poured water into a pan of grease. The actuator shorted out and exploded. Chimera froze in an awkward pose, straining against the exoskeleton. But she didn't move. When Chimera started cursing, Nix realized the suit had trapped the assassin. Without power, the exoskeleton's steel bones and joints had become a high-tech Iron Maiden. Nix didn't wait for the woman to find a way out. Mustering all the power she had left, she kicked her in the chest. There was a loud crack as a strip of the exoskeleton buckled inward, no doubt crushing Chimera's sternum. The woman sailed backward across the small room and crashed into the same wall Nix had already hit twice. Chimera fell right through it, in a heap. It surprised Nix to see her adversary, covered in white dust and brittle pieces of the flimsy sheetrock, lay half in and half out of another room. One they hadn't known was there. Nicks moved in closer, and a very woozy Fatima stepped up next to her. Suddenly, Chimera's arms swung up fast, reaching for Nicks. Fatma fired her gun, this time with deadly accuracy. Fwump. Fwump. 2 bullets hit Chimera in the chest, and she slumped back down. Chapter 4. Luna 1. Katrina Green jogged down the hallway to the weapons vault. She entered the security code. It buzzed, and the indicator light flashed red. She was locked out. Commander Peterson had overridden her access. "Damn him," she growled. "When did he do that?" Such changes in protocols should have been discussed with her. She was in charge of base security, but Peterson had a way of undermining her authority. He micromanaged everything. She raced back to where her teammates were gathered, cursing Peterson under her breath. Even though they'd only trained a few times with them, 6 lunar rifles were in the weapons safe, and she hadn't been able to get even one of them. As she jogged back, she mentally rehearsed a brief diplomatic appeal, something like, "Sir, just to be safe, let's get at least 1 rifle up here." However, when she reached the rear module, all thoughts of an appeal vanished. Something was seriously wrong. The premonition of danger pressed its full weight down upon her. She stopped short of turning the corner, backed up, and jogged back to the comms panel in the adjacent hallway. When she tapped into the security feed, audio and video images from the confrontation flashed on the screen. In seconds, she was overcome by the sickening feeling of defeat. The trio of new astronauts, still wearing their pressure suits, had stepped out of the airlock, and at least one had a weapon pointed at her crew. The mysterious woman with them was giving orders, and the conversation implied she intended to take command. Ironically, the Luna 1 crew had trained for every emergency except this. It was a 1,000,000-to-1 problem that should have been impossible. Hell, there was no evidence that anyone other than the United States and Ryder Astronautics had ever made a successful manned trip to the lunar surface, much less established a military presence. Believing they were the only ones devious enough to travel to the moon in secret was an apparent fatal flaw in their security plans. Green watched as the female leader stepped forward and aimed her rifle at Commander Peterson. Peterson raised his hands as if surrendering, but his hard stare implied he refused to be intimidated. "You are inside a pressurized, oxygen-rich environment. If you fire that weapon, we'll all die. If you're trying to scare us, you've seriously miscalculated." "No, Commander, you are the one who has miscalculated." The invading astronaut let the end of the rifle swing a few feet to the left, then pulled the trigger. A dart with a sticky gel tip shot out and slammed into the largest observation window. In quick succession, she fired 2 more rounds. Almost simultaneously, 3 tiny lights embedded in the gooey blobs blinked to life. They seemed in sync, strobing every few seconds. Kilgore held out a black controller. His thumb hovered over the detonation trigger. 3 military-grade explosives activated by the button on the stock of my weapon and the controller in my comrade's hand, the leader said, pointing at the device. "If you refuse to stand down, I will blow those portholes and kill your entire crew. Our suits will afford us enough protection." Peterson, now sweating profusely, spun in a circle, looking at the explosive charges, then at Turner and Rogers. Finally, he turned back to the woman, cursing under his breath. "As you can see, there is no choice but to submit," she said. Peterson held up his hands in the universal sign of surrender. Green's heart sank, but there was no time to get emotional. She needed to find a place to hide, then restore the emergency channel and signal Rollins and the rest of the Delta Black team at Vandenberg. But first, she would watch this play out. Perhaps there was more to learn about these invaders. The woman directed her attention towards Omar Turner. "Mr. Turner, reset the airlock and help me change the passcode," she commanded. "We will use it temporarily to hold your crew until we can build more secure accommodations." Turner glanced at Peterson, seeking direction or validation. "Do it now," the woman stated, her voice thick with a Chinese accent but devoid of any discernible emotion. Turner's stoic facade faltered, but he didn't immediately comply. Instead, he looked to Peterson out of loyalty, awaiting his commanding officer's orders. Without missing a beat, the woman motioned to her associate. Garrick moved with lightning speed, drawing a handheld rock hammer from his utility belt. With brutal force, he swung it into the side of Peterson's head. The sickening crack of bone echoed through the room as Peterson crumpled to the ground, unconscious and bleeding profusely. Green's heart raced as she watched the blood pool around Peterson's head, his chest rising and falling shallowly. He wasn't dead, but one more blow like that would surely do him in. Shocked and horrified, Rogers let out a cry, dropping to Peterson's side in a futile attempt to aid his wounded companion. Meanwhile, Turner was doing his utmost to contain his rage and shock. His gaze rested on the astronaut who wielded the hammer, a calculating look flashing across his face. "Mr. Turner, 2 of your crew members have been injured. Do you wish to be the third?" For a beat, Turner locked eyes with the woman. Then he glanced at the explosives, still blinking on the portholes until his stoic demeanor faltered. Wordlessly, he headed over to the control panel and punched in the necessary commands. While Kilgore and Garrick stood guard, Turner and Rogers pulled Peterson into the airlock, laying him beside the unmoving body of Kyle Connors. Once a new passcode was programmed, the woman hit the switch, closing it. While the men looked back helplessly from inside, the woman, along with Kilgore and Garrick, took off their pressure suits. When she was done, she stepped up to the airlock to make a speech. "Mr. Turner, Mr. Rogers, my name is Dr. Ying-Yue Fang, and you are now my prisoners. By creating and operating this military facility in secret, the United States of America has violated all known international space treaties between the nations of Earth. I now claim possession of this moonbase. You and your crew are now prisoners of war and will be prosecuted for your crimes at the next available opportunity. Luna 1 now belongs to me. Make no attempt to retake it, or you will be killed." With no further ceremony, she turned away and walked deeper into the base as if she'd owned it all along. Chapter 5. Buenos Aires. Nicks turned on Fatima indignantly. "We were supposed to interrogate her." "Don't say another word," Fatima held up her hand, "or the next bullet goes in your sorry robot ass." "Damn it." Nicks paced around Chimera's body. "Secure her. Make her talk. That was the plan." "Well, that plan went to hell and back. She was one good punch away from killing us both," Fatima shouted. "That's not what we agreed," Nicks growled. The 2 women were now nose to nose. "Fucking mothers," Fatima shouted. "You are welcome." "It's motherfucker, not fucking mothers," Nicks corrected. "Maybe your mother, not mine," Fatima yelled back. Nicks sighed dramatically and raised her hands to the ceiling, as if petitioning God for help. "She was our only lead to Riza Asmara." Fatima shook her head and pointed at Chimera. "That bitch is dead, just like this bitch." Yeah, so everyone tells me." Nicks had been having this argument for months with almost everyone on the team. It was possible they were right and she was chasing a ghost, but it sure as hell didn't feel that way. "Wait a minute," Fatima said. "Is that another body in there?" She pointed into the dark room that had been exposed when Chimera fell through the wall. "Is that a foot?" Nicks crouched and peered into the shadowy alcove. "And a leg? Jesus, you're right. Hard to smell anything but spilled tequila and your bullshit." Fatma crinkled her nose. "But there is one more scent." "What's that?" "Death," Nicks agreed. This second corpse had been in the room for some time. "Do you see a door anywhere?" she asked. Fatima searched up and down the wall, then shrugged. "There must be one, but I can't find it on this wall." "We'd better check it out." Nicks pulled out a small flashlight, turned it on, and they both squeezed through the hole. The corpse was an older, silver-haired Asian man with a sparse goatee. Thick Coke bottle glasses sat askew on his face. He lay along the eastern wall of the room, on a collapsible cot, as if he had died while taking a nap. "What is this place?" Fatma asked, as she pulled out her own flashlight. "I don't know, but all of this equipment looks expensive." The room was rank from the corpse and slightly more humid than the apartment. Nicks tried breathing through her mouth as she continued looking around. The opposite wall housed a complex ensemble of technology. A utilitarian card table supported 2 computers, their screens lit up with vibrant screensavers. Next to this, a compact wooden desk cradled a very advanced electronic system, several servers, and a high-powered audio receiver with amplifier. A handheld microphone lay coiled across the surface, and a pair of noise-canceling headphones lay nearby. This setup was no ordinary collection. It was a well-engineered communication array. Something about it all reminded her of tech she had seen before. A step further into the room revealed a third desk with neat stacks of books, folders, and paper printouts. A small refrigerator and a microwave were pushed up under the table. However, it was the final piece that piqued Nicks's interest. A large, high-end telescope pointed at a small curtained window and toward the heavens. An expensive-looking DSLR camera was mounted on the end via a large ringed adapter. The instrument suggested a curiosity for astronomy, or perhaps a more clandestine purpose, like satellite tracking. Nicks investigated the book table. There were numerous charts of the moon, images of the polar regions, a map of the dark side, and specifications about the mineral content of the moon's surface. 2 English textbooks on Crucial Experiments in Exotic Matter and Mining Rare Elements in Space lay open. There was also an open notebook next to the books. Nicks flipped through it, but it was hard to guess the writer's true intentions, since the notes were indecipherable and there were numbers. Lots and lots of numbers. "None of this writing is in English or Spanish," she said, scanning it with her flashlight. Fatima took one piece in her hand and reviewed it. She was better at languages than Nicks. "That's Chinese, and some of this looks military." Nicks pulled out her smartphone and took pictures of the room. Fatima helped by spotlighting each item as Nicks snapped away. "Here's the entrance," Fatima said. She pointed to a hinged panel, maybe half the size of a standard door. It opened up into the back of one of the apartment's smaller storage closets, proving the room was for clandestine purposes. On the wall they had broken through, there were several 8x10 photos pinned with tacks. Someone had labeled each one with a name. Nicks scanned from left to right, taking pictures of each image. The first was a man named Shang Fu, an older, grizzled-looking Chinese soldier. Medals adorned his crisp uniform, indicating a very high rank. He seemed to be the focus of interest, since most of the images on the wall were of him. The next person of interest was an Asian woman with a serious, stern expression. In all her photos, she seemed engrossed in some kind of scientific work. The best close-up showed her wearing a white lab coat that bore a lanyard and a photo ID with obvious military credentials. Her name was Fang. After that, there were a series of grainy telephoto images taken of an Asian man who wore glasses and a pristine white suit. All of these photos were tagged with a sticky note labeled "The Rook," but several question marks dotted the note. It seemed the intel about this man was still unclear. The rest of the collection seemed to be people in active military service or associated with some type of military operation. There was a middle-aged white woman standing in front of a row of computer servers. Her name was Vanessa Grimes. 2 rough-hooking military prisoners named Midnight and his relative, whose label said Sister. Finally, there was a younger, handsome man named Ryder and a burly, bearded man named Vels. Veles had coal-black eyes, a grim expression, and wore a dark navy uniform that appeared to be Russian. There were also many images of space vehicles, all of which seemed to be marked by the distinctive red Chinese flag. In one image, something labeled the Dadao sat on what seemed to be a rocket launch platform. The rocket, if you could call it that, was something Nicks had never seen. A plane of sorts, straight from a science fiction movie. The silver skin seemed polished chrome, and the underbelly's dark black tiles, like scales on a great dragon, offered a startling contrast. The other pictures didn't seem to fit the military pattern. It was some kind of nondescript installation in the desert. Neither Nicks nor Fatma had ever seen it before and had no idea of the exact location. In fact, none of the information at first glance made much sense, and the photos just added to the mystery. However, Nicks sensed a theme in the room. The telescope, the lunar charts, and the notes in the journals all had to do with space. She had to assume the dead man was Chinese, since most of the detritus in the room was of Chinese origin. But it wasn't easy to tell. Just how long had he been here? Had Chimera killed him? It seemed the most likely explanation, but there was no obvious sign of murder or struggle. Or perhaps she missed something? She moved closer to the corpse. There was a nightstand at the foot of the cot. It held a small lamp and a portable computer. Nicks froze in her tracks. On top of the laptop was a child's toy. A horrifyingly familiar toy. A jolt of recognition hit her like a bullet in the chest. The toy was a small rubber octopus. A goddamn toy octopus, just like the one Riza Asmara cherished as a child. Identical to the one Asmara had kept in her room while detained and tested by DARPA scientists. And, just like the facsimile that DR Ultra created out of explosive resin in an attempt to kill Asmara. With complete careless abandon, Nicks picked the toy up and studied it, not even considering that it might be dangerous. "Get the laptop," she said, never taking her eyes off the toy. "We'll take that and this with us. We'll send a forensics team for the rest." Fatima grabbed the laptop, but it wouldn't come easy. The power cord seemed to be tangled up around the foot of the cot. She yanked the cord, and they both heard a strange chime, and then a beeping that Fatma thought was coming from the laptop itself. "Damn," she muttered. "How do I turn this thing off without breaking it?" She had little use for technology unless it involved gunpowder or bullets. "Here, let me help," Nicks said, finally stuffing the toy in her jacket pocket. As Nicks examined the computer, the beeping sound increased in volume. Nicks and Fatima simultaneously turned toward Chimera. The sound wasn't coming from the computer. Two lights, one on each wrist of the exoskeleton, blinked in unison. "I thought the damn suit thing shorted out," Fatima said. Nicks shrugged and stepped closer to examine the lights. They chimed every second, like clockwork it seemed. Fatima leaned over. "What do you make of it?" Nicks reached down, turned Chimera's head to the side, and swept her hair away from her neck to reveal a silver skull. Two red lights, smaller and less visible than those on the wrists, flashed from within, blinking like eyes. They kept time with the others. Nicks brushed her finger over the familiar-looking implant. The beeping sped up. Double time now, very much like a countdown. "It's a bomb!" Nicks screamed. "Run, Fatma, run!" The two women vaulted over Chimera back into the living room, jumped over all the damaged furniture, and sprinted toward the balcony. Nicks reached over, hooked her arm under Fatma, and leapt forward bionically, half throwing her friend and herself out the window, over the balcony, and into the alleyway many stories below. In the fall, Nicks pulled Fatima tighter, twisting to land safely for both of them. Her right foot hit the ground solidly, but her ankle twisted, and they tumbled, rolling over each other in a cartoonish ball of legs and arms. Seconds later, the apartment exploded like a missile had hit it. The shockwave rocked the building to its foundation. Nearby windows shattered as the building trembled. Concrete and debris rained down, and fire and smoke billowed out into the night sky. Nix and Fatima stared in disbelief while the glow of orange flames danced over their faces. They'd barely made it out in time. Nix had felt justified tracking down Chimera, but instead of answering questions, the whole effort had just produced more. What in the hell had they found in that apartment? She reached into her jacket and felt the toy, still there. It had been planted there for her, specifically for her. She had no doubt about it, which meant Riza Asmara was indeed alive. But where? Nix looked down and saw Fatima still had the laptop. Maybe, just maybe, it held some answers. That concludes this part of Moonbase Rogue. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Please like and subscribe and follow this channel to get the next installment of this exciting story. Visit Mark at JonesMarkC on all the socials for additional information and links to other free audiobooks and the next book in this series. Until next time, thank you for listening.